What is a Ferris wheel? What is a merry-go-round? How does it relate to your two fundamental keys to better rotation? Let's get into it. So going into two different types of rotation, I think there's a couple of these that are, or these two pieces that we're going to go into are incredibly important for two different reasons. And I think a lot of us either have too much of one and not enough of the other, or we might have all of one and none of the other. So we're going to explain these two pieces conceptually and what their causes and what their effects are. So if we look at rotation, I think it's a word that's used a little bit too freely in the golf world. Like if we actually went into what anatomical rotation would be, it would actually be the rotation from this part of our spine. Okay? I'm going to explain this in a couple of cool lights for us and what their purposes are, and also how we can mend those together to create maximum of everything. So here's my first analogies that I would use. Is we've got two types of, we're going to call it two types of rotation. Okay, so let's imagine a Ferris wheel. So if I had a Ferris wheel right in here, the way that this would work rotationally, it would work more on this vertical axis. It would work this direction and this direction. It could be like a ride in an amusement park. It works up on this axis, down on this axis. And then we'd have a merry-go-round. A merry-go-round works more parallel to the ground in this manner. Now, in the golf swing, I think we need a little bit of both. One of the biggest issues that I see out of players that I coach or players that come to me for golf lessons is we see far too much merry-go-round. So a lot of times this gets the shoulders too level. It gets the upper body's mass too far back, and it can get the hands too level, or we have to lift. So we see a lot of this look right in here. Okay, well now I've got two options. Either A, I'm going to move pressure forward and keep this coming from the inside that creates too much outward movement coming into impact, or we see the player reverse it and come back over the top, and then they create too much inward movement down through low point and impact. Okay, so that would be one scenario. We look at other players right here, and I have players that have come to me that have too much of this. So they have almost too much Ferris wheel to where the upper body gets too far in front of the lower body, and now they're left with an option. Either A, they come over, stop, stand up, and pull in against them, or they go from here and they move backwards. They tilt backwards, and they also create too much outward movement through impact, and a lot of times we catch these heavy and we catch those thin. Those are what I would say the two extremes are from the two different types of rotation here that we're going to cover. I hope you're enjoying today's video, and if you'd like the way that I explain things and how I break things down, I would love to have you check out my online membership site, Club TS. So inside of this, you're going to have access to unlimited video lessons, group coaching calls that we do weekly, and as well, you're going to have the ability to ask me questions where I can film content for you customized. We also offer practice plans for players of all abilities. So inside of the link here, that's going to give you access to a free 14-day trial that I would love to have you check out. So thank you for watching. Now back to the video. Now, when we're actually able to mend these two pieces together, I think the harmony of it's really cool and what it's able to help us create in the golf swing. So let's start with the Ferris wheel analogy and what this actually allows us and helps us to do from a movement standpoint. So I've got two double alignment sticks right in here. So what you'll see out of this is our Ferris wheel analogy also gets the chest extending. Okay, can create a side tilt. It can be side bending. It can be extension of the spine, but really the purpose of this is what gets the golf club to create rise here without me changing my hinge or my bends in my arm. This is one of the things that can help us accelerate and get the golf club working up more in a vertical fashion right here. So if I just did all Ferris wheel right in here, this would look like this, okay? So the purpose of this part of our rotation is to get the golf club from its starting point and to create width and start to create rise. Now, when we look at the merry-go-round part, so our rotation that works around us, around the inclination of the spine, this is what helps us keep depth both away, Ferris wheel, and away to create handle depth. So if I start off right here and I go Ferris wheel to about P3, now I create merry-go-round. You can see that's what's starting to produce depth away from the golf ball at the top of our motion right here. I think it's also a way that we can move these two pieces in harmony to where we're also able to stay pretty centered over the golf ball, and it creates verticals, horizontals, and it also creates torque in all three dimensions right there. Okay, so I think the order of this is pretty darn important. What I would say I see out of a lot of amateurs here is I think our first move is we go merry-go-round. Now I'm not really in a position to try and create rise. So if I were to look at the first part of it, if we go into how to sequence this properly, is I think our first feel needs to be more of this Ferris wheel feel, because again, what you'll see here is this starts to get our spine inclination, our side bend, our pressure can be shifting right while we're still staying on center. It creates our width as well. So it's what helps us get the shoulder inclination here down, gets the pressure moving back so that now we can kick our rotational force in, our merry-go-round, to create depth. So if I combined these and I went through this slow, I'd be going Ferris wheel, merry-go-round. So as soon as I start to create merry-go-round, that's what creates depth to where you can see the handle is more in line with my right shoe. It's also helping me keep the club on our three-dimensional plane right there. So I think the order and the process that we move these pieces into is incredibly important from a sequential standpoint. I think it's also important that we're able to stay centered while we're doing it. That would be my preference. Now, is that me saying that I don't have any players that move a little bit more off the golf ball? I do. And I think this is the important piece that I hope everybody takes out of this video right here is you need to understand, what do you have too much of and what do we have too little of? If I have too much Ferris wheel, I'm going to have to offset that with more rotation. If I have too much rotation here, I'm going to have to offset that with more of this Ferris wheel feel to create rise and keep this golf club working on its three-dimensional plane. Because you can see when I do this in here in my rehearsal, I'm not going to change my arm structure very much. You can see the amount of width that I can create, but I can also create rise and I can create depth. Then if I had any raise from the shoulder, the humerus, I can also add hinge, I can add extension in the trail wrist, And this is now set to come right back down this plane in my downswing. I think this is a really important piece. So firstly, for you guys, figure out, do you have too much merry-go-round that would look like this? Or do you have, if you do you have too much Ferris wheel that looks like this? If you have too much of this, you might actually need to feel, to stay centered, you might have to feel like the upper spine is going behind the lower, which will probably put you at neutral. And if you're the opposite, if you have too much merry-go-round or rotation, actual rotation, and you get the chest too far behind the hips, you might need to feel like you have more of a forward tilt. That's to keep us on center so that the hand path can continue to work around the arc on our three-dimensional plane right there. So when we look at this, I think it's important as well to come up with ways that we can practice this. So for me, how I always rehearse it is I go Ferris wheel to P3. I'll do this 2 or 3 times. Then I'll add my rotation in. So now I'm completing this. So I'm going Ferris wheel first so that I'm getting my left bend in, a little bit of a pressure shift to the right, but I'm staying on center. And you can see this line on my shirt, it almost has what we would call a reverse tilt to it. There might be a little bit of a shift in the pelvis, and that's to also get the trail hip higher than the lead hip, the trail shoulder higher than the lead shoulder. And then we can start to turn around that inclination to create our depth. So for me, when I'm practicing this, I'm going to go Ferris wheel 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to add turn. And there's my depth. And I can feel how this club's working on this three-dimensional plane, that I can just bring it right back down that plane. We'll give one a go. Ferris wheel, turn, and then we'll go. Oh, and that was a really good strike. And again, what I like about this for me is this creates a lot of width here from face on, a lot of width away from the golf ball and away from the target. But then from down the line, it also creates width getting the handle away from the golf ball, because I don't want this just traveling up this line forever and we don't have enough depth to where now we're left with tilting out of it, can cause too steep, etc. So one of the cooler topics that I've ever learned in golf, I hope you get something out of this. 2 different types of rotation. We have Ferris wheel, merry-go-round. Stick to the process, stick to the order. I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video here. If you haven't, please click that subscribe button. You can also click the bell right there, and that's going to notify you every time that I release a new YouTube video. Also, if you haven't, check out that last video that I did. It's right here, pinned to the screen. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, any comments, please leave those below, and I will make sure I get back to each and every one of you. So, thank you again. Appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.